Alan, so it's not only about China retaliating on trade with potentially soybean reductions, but it's also about NAFTA. So the U.S. administration just fighting on multiple fronts.
It is on multiple fronts, and it's fronts that are incredibly important for agriculture. China, Canada, Mexico are always the top three markets by far for U.S. agricultural exports. In the case of China, there's not much they can retaliate against other than agriculture because they're such a big market for farm goods. So a lot of nervous folks in farm country right now. You've been seeing it in the markets with soybeans reaching a 2-year low. It's going to be hard to sell this year's crop without significant discounts, and at this point, it's too late to plant anything else. So farmers are kind of locked in.
Alan, can you just sort of amplify the fact that there really isn't a nation in the world that believes in free trade when it comes to agriculture? They are all protectionist. Do you ever see that changing?
Well, it's protectionist to varying degrees. I mean, you've seen a lot of liberalization over the last 30 to 40 years. Countries like New Zealand really have very little of a farm subsidy regime. And in the United States and other countries, you've seen a real move away from a farm policy that managed supply to really relying on export markets. That's where this starts to hit. You know, a generation ago, you had much more insular agricultural markets, subsidized heavily by the government. They're not really responsive to market forces. As you have created a globalized agricultural trade system, you make them more responsive to something exactly like this, where a trade war ends up hitting agriculture possibly harder than any other sector.
And President Trump calling out Canada when it comes to its dairy market. Tell us a little bit, what's the issue there?
So getting back to supply management, there are some commodities where quota systems to kind of restrict domestic production and supply to keep prices up are still in effect. Canada and dairy is one of the world's great examples of that. It's a very closed market. Because of that, you have some tariff schedules that indeed can become exorbitant in certain circumstances. President Trump has really seized on Canadian dairy policy as one of the reasons to justify this trade war. The issue is that really Canada's policy on dairy is more the exception than the rule. So while you may have a case for that for something in NAFTA, it becomes part of this broader trade war that affects a lot of other commodities besides that.